Hello, welcome to the Craft House Magic Set of Tutorials. I'm Ellie and this is part 3 of the toe up sock. We've now knitted the leg part of the sock and we're now about to transfer to the 2x2 rib part. Now, because I want to change into the rib when I'm changing colour, I make sure that I've done one round where I've done the new colour, otherwise it makes a strange pattern with the pearl bumps. So this is one I've done earlier and you can see I've got one row of the grey before I then start 2x2 rib, and this just prevents you from getting funny blue bumps on this first row. So what we need to do is just do a 2x2 rib for as many rows as you'd like. On this one I think I've done about 17 rows, or until I've just got nearly to the end of the dark grey, because I'm sticking to the stripes for the ribbed area. So I'm just going to do two by two rib. So I've been carrying on with my 2x2 rib and I've come close to the end of the dark grey stripe. So you can see here where I've switched from one grey to another, or where the yarn's changed from one grey to the other, you can see that the light grey pearl bumps go into the dark grey stripe. So that's what would have happened down here if I hadn't just done a plain row of knit before I went into the 2x2 rib. And I think it's more obvious on the join here. One tip that I'd like to share with you is that I always like to start my needle with the knit 2 bit, so that whenever I turn my needle around I can just go ahead straight away and start knitting without really thinking about it. So what I did was, like, when I come to the end of this needle I'd actually finished on a knit 2, so I switched 2 stitches from the back needle to this side, so that my next needle started with a knit 2, which I find much easier. So now we are coming to the point where we want to cast off. So what I did is, because I wanted to finish on the grey stripe, is I actually cut the yarn where the yarn changed to the next colour, and I measured about 1 metre from the end of the yarn so that I could keep knitting until I reached that point, and I've got 1 metre now to cast off my stitches. So I'm going to use the sewn bind off method. So normally if you're going to bind off using this sewn bind off method, you need about 3 times the length or width, if you're knitting a sock, of the yarn left over, but I think a good rule is just to leave about 1 metre, and then you'll have plenty to bind off properly. So I threaded my tapestry needle on the end of the yarn and I'm going to start binding off. So I hope you can see this. So I've got 2 stitches that are knit, and I'm going to put my needle in purlwise into both of those stitches and pull that through. And I want to keep the tension nice because I don't want a gap between the beginning and the end of the bind off. And then I stick my needle in knitwise into the first stitch, and I'm just going to pull that stitch off there. So I'm going to show you one more time. Purlwise through 2 stitches, pull the yarn through, knitwise through 1 stitch, and at the same time take that stitch off the needle. And you want to keep this relatively tight, not too tight, but don't leave it too loose, otherwise you'll have a squiffy edge once you've cast off. So I'm going to do that all the way around the top of the sock. I've now worked the bind off all the way around the sock until I've got 1 stitch left, and all you need to do now is thread your needle through that stitch and pull it, and you've bound off. And as you can see, you've got quite a stretchy bind off that'll go nicely around your leg. So I now want to sew the ends in. So what I like to do is just catch the beginning of the cast on with my needle go through there just so that it joins it nicely together. Then I go to the back of the work. I like to thread my needle into these knit stitches in the rib. So you can see I've got my needle through there, and I just pull my yarn through those. And I like to work it just a little bit further down the rib as well. And then I like to go back on myself just a little bit. So that should just secure your stitches nicely. Don't pull too tight, otherwise you'll pull the loop up. But there we go, and I can just snip that off now. And there we are, we have the finished bind off. It is slightly wavy, but it's not quite as wavy compared to the bind offs like Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off on a sock. So now we just need to sew the other end in. So I'm going to turn my sock inside out. I'm going to sew this end in. So I've threaded my needle, and I'm just going to go into the purl bumps diagonally here. Sorry about the camera, it's not focusing very well, I'm on a different camera today. So I've just gone into a few purl bumps diagonally, pull that thread, and then I like to go, so I've gone down this way, I'm going to go up in a V shape in this direction now. There we go. And then I'm just going to go back on myself for the last couple of stitches. You can see that I've just gone back, so I've threaded it up, down, and then back on myself as well, remembering not to go into the last loop again, just so that it loops around and goes back in. So I'm going to pull that, there we go, so then your ends are sewn in. So what I like to do is fill the washing up bowl with some warm water, and I either use a little soap bar like this. These little soap bars are especially for washing your socks with. This one I've got from Fondant Fibre. Sometimes I use wash like this. This is a Tesco's own make, sort of a Delicate's hand wash to wash my socks in. And once I've filled the bowl with some water and I rubbed the soap into the socks gently, give it a bit of a squidge and leave it to soak for 20 or 30 minutes. I then empty the bowl out, just squeeze the moisture out the sock, and then I just rinse it a couple of times. And then when it's really wet, I like to put it on a towel and just roll the towel up into the sock and just give it a squeeze, and this gets most of the moisture out before you start to put it on your blocking wire. So I've got these blocking wires, and I will put a link below where I got them from Loop of London, and they're Bryson blocking wires. The way I've got the camera set up, you can't really see the whole thing, but it's basically just a wire frame. You can get other blocking wires or plastic blockers from Amazon, for example, but I like these metal ones because they've got a massive hole in the middle, they tend to dry quicker. When with my washed sock, I place it on the sock blocker, and I'll just leave it to dry. I normally hang it on a radiator or something, or outside, and that'll be nice and flat. Now, I don't always wash and block my socks. I sometimes just wash them and leave them to dry on the line or the radiator, because I've got so many washed at the same time, so I've only got one set of sock blockers. But they just look really nice if you're going to gift them, to put them on some blockers like this. Alternatively, you can pin your sock out onto a towel or some blocking mats once they've been squidged out, and pin them with some blocking pins or some normal pins. Beware though that if you're using normal pins, they do get blunt if you use them for blocking. So there we are, that's how I make my sock toe up. I hope the little advice on how to wash and block your sock at the end is okay. Any questions, just pop them in the down bar, and any suggestions on further tutorials, it'd be lovely to hear what you've got to say. Thanks for watching, bye!